Did you know that most people only remember about 20% of what they read? That's right, 80% of the information you take in can slip through your mind, leaving you with less than you bargained for. But here's the shocking part. Research shows that the way you learn can drastically change how much you remember. Imagine if you could learn faster, remember more, and truly understand everything you study. Enter the Feynman Technique. Developed by Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, this method is one of the most powerful ways to absorb new information quickly. In fact, studies show that people who use this technique retain up to 70% more of what they learn. It's a simple, yet incredibly effective approach that anyone can use, whether you're a student, a professional, or just a lifelong learner. In this video, I'll show you how to use the Feynman technique to transform the way you study. I'll walk you through the exact steps, share some surprising facts, and even demonstrate how to apply it with a live example. By the end, you'll be able to learn faster than ever before. Ready to unlock your brain's full potential? Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Unlocking Genius. The power of simplifying complex ideas. The Feynman technique is a game-changer when it comes to learning faster and more efficiently. Named after physicist Richard Feynman, it's based on the idea that if you can't explain something simply, you don't truly understand it. Feynman himself said, "If you can't explain something to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it." This quote sums up the essence of the technique, turning complex ideas into simple, digestible explanations. Think about it. When we try to learn something, we often get caught up in technical jargon and confusing concepts. This makes it harder to remember and apply the information later. But with the Feynman technique, you break it down. You take something complicated and explain it as if you're teaching a child. This not only helps you understand the material more deeply but also improves your retention. Studies show that active teaching can improve learning significantly. In fact, research from the Journal of Educational Psychology found that teaching others helps reinforce your own learning by 70%. That's right, teaching is one of the most powerful tools for improving your understanding. The beauty of simplifying a topic is that it forces you to grasp the fundamentals. When you explain it simply, you're naturally forced to identify gaps in your own knowledge. If you struggle to explain a concept clearly, that's a sign you need to go back and study it more. Another benefit of simplifying is that it makes learning more enjoyable. No one likes being overwhelmed by jargon and complicated theories. By breaking down a topic into manageable chunks, you take away the intimidation factor and make learning fun. It's like peeling back layers to reveal a more satisfying, easier to understand version of the material. Chapter 2. The 3-step magic. Observe, teach, repeat. Now, let's dive into the 3 steps of the Feynman technique. The first step is simple: observe. This means diving deep into the material and truly understanding the core ideas. Whether it's reading a textbook or watching a tutorial, your goal is to get a solid grasp of the subject matter. Observation doesn't just mean passively absorbing information. Feynman was a huge advocate of active learning. He'd say, "What I cannot create, I do not understand." This shows us the importance of making concepts your own through observation and engagement. It's not enough to just read or listen. You have to actively engage with the material. Once you've observed and absorbed the information, the second step is to teach. This is where the magic happens. Teaching forces you to structure the material clearly and simplify it. You want to explain it in your own words as if you were explaining it to someone else. In fact, teaching is one of the best ways to test your understanding. A study by Roediger and Butler, 2011, showed that people who taught others retained more information than those who simply reviewed it. This happens because teaching helps reinforce the knowledge, making it stick longer. The final step is repeat. This is where most people fall short. After you teach the concept, you should go back and review what you've learned. The repetition helps solidify the information in your long-term memory. This process of teaching and revisiting is what leads to deeper learning. By repeating this process, you actively engage your brain in different ways. You're reinforcing what you know and filling in the gaps you might have missed the first time around. It's no surprise that some of the most successful people, including Feynman himself, used this method repeatedly. Practice makes perfect, and in this case, it makes learning faster and more effective. Chapter 3. Learning through laughter. Turning complexity into comedy. Here's a fun twist. Using humor can actually speed up your learning process. Feynman believed that humor played a huge role in understanding. He often said that, if you can't explain it simply, you're not getting it. And one of the easiest ways to simplify something is by turning it into something funny or absurd. Making learning fun is more than just a mental trick. According to psychology, humor engages the brain and enhances memory retention. In one study, researchers found that students who learned material with humor remembered it 22% longer than those who learned the same material in a serious tone. Humor also makes concepts more relatable. For example, you might find it easier to understand the laws of physics if you imagine them as characters in a sitcom. This makes abstract concepts much more concrete. It's like putting a funny spin on a difficult task to make it less intimidating. But humor doesn't just make things easier to understand, it also keeps you engaged. If you approach learning with a sense of playfulness, you're more likely to stick with it. In fact, 85% of people report that they learn better when they're engaged and having fun. This engagement keeps your mind active and open to new information. Feynman himself was known for his playful approach to science. He once explained quantum mechanics to a group of students by comparing it to a game of blackjack. By turning complex ideas into something entertaining, he made them easier to digest and enjoy. So, when you're using the Feynman technique, don't be afraid to bring some humor into your explanations. It's a great way to stay relaxed, simplify tough concepts, and make the learning process more enjoyable. It's the difference between memorizing a boring fact and remembering it because it made you smile. Learning doesn't have to be dry and serious, it can be fun, engaging, and faster when you add a little humor to the mix. If you're finding this helpful so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more tips on learning faster and more effectively. Chapter 4. Mind Mapping for Mastery. Visualizing what you teach. Incorporating mind mapping into the Feynman technique takes your learning to the next level. Mind mapping is a powerful tool for organizing and visualizing information in a way that makes it easier to digest and recall. When you combine this with the Feynman technique, you create a system that helps both your brain and memory. A mind map is simply a visual representation of a topic, where you write down the main idea in the center and branch out into related concepts. This method taps into your brain's natural ability to recognize patterns and relationships between ideas. Studies have shown that visual learning increases retention by up to 400% compared to reading alone. So, why not leverage that for faster learning? When you start mapping out a topic, you're not only organizing your thoughts but also discovering connections you might have missed otherwise. By drawing arrows or lines between ideas, you see how everything ties together. This holistic approach makes the material easier to understand and recall. One of the key benefits of mind mapping is that it engages both the left and right sides of your brain. The left side deals with logic, analysis, and facts, while the right side handles creativity and visualization. By using both sides of your brain, you're boosting your ability to retain and apply what you've learned. Mind mapping also encourages active recall. Instead of passively reading through notes or lectures, you're actively engaging with the material. You're not just memorizing facts, you're constructing meaning. This deep processing helps reinforce the learning in a way that pure repetition can't match. Let's take an example. If you're learning about the water cycle, you can create a mind map with water cycle at the center. From there, branch out to evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and collection. Each of these branches can have sub-branches, like definitions, examples, and connections to other concepts. This visual map allows you to quickly see the entire process and understand how each stage flows into the next. Studies in cognitive science reveal that creating these visual connections helps solidify information in long-term memory. As the brain makes connections, it strengthens neural pathways, making it easier to recall the information later. So, the next time you're studying with the Feynman technique, try adding a mind map to your process. You'll find that not only do you understand the material better, but you also retain it longer. Chapter 5. The Secret Weapon. Teaching as the ultimate test. When it comes to learning, the best test of your knowledge is how well you can teach it to others. The Feynman technique revolves around this concept. Teaching isn't just a way to help others, it's a way to solidify your own learning. If you can explain something clearly to someone else, it means you've truly understood it. Richard Feynman himself was an advocate of the idea that the ultimate form of learning is teaching. He once said, "What I cannot create, I do not understand." For Feynman, if he couldn't teach a concept in simple terms, he knew he hadn't mastered it. This approach became a cornerstone of his success, both as a physicist and educator. Research backs this up. A study published in the Journal of Educational Psychology found that people who taught a concept to someone else retained 90% of the information, compared to only 70% for those who simply studied it. The act of explaining forces you to break down the concept, reframe it, and check for gaps in your understanding. When you teach, you engage in a process called active recall. This is when you actively pull information out of your brain instead of passively absorbing it. Active recall has been shown to strengthen neural connections and significantly improve long-term retention. In fact, one study showed that students who used active recall techniques, like teaching, outperformed others by a significant margin. Teaching also forces you to focus on the core principles of a concept. Instead of getting lost in unnecessary details, you're pushed to focus on the most important elements of the topic. This helps you internalize the material in a more effective way. One way to apply this is by teaching an imaginary student. If you don't have anyone around, pretend you're explaining the concept to a 5-year-old. The key is to use simple language and avoid jargon. If you get stuck or find yourself using terms you don't fully understand, it's a sign you need to revisit the topic. Not only does teaching help you learn better, but it also increases your confidence. When you successfully explain a difficult concept, you get immediate feedback on your understanding. This boosts your self-esteem and motivates you to keep learning. By turning teaching into a regular part of your learning process, you create a cycle of continuous improvement. The more you teach, the better you understand. The better you understand, the more you can teach. It's a powerful loop that accelerates learning and makes the process more rewarding. Chapter 6. Feynman in Action. Live example of learning something new. To truly understand how the Feynman technique works, let's see it in action. Imagine you're learning about something entirely new to you. Let's say, the concept of photosynthesis in plants. You're starting from scratch, with no prior knowledge about it. First, you begin by observing. You gather information by reading articles, watching videos, or listening to experts. You dive into the basics, understanding that photosynthesis is the process by which plants use sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. This is the observation phase. Once you have a basic understanding, the next step is to teach it. Now, instead of just rereading the material, you explain photosynthesis as if you're teaching a child. You might say, imagine plants are like little solar panels. They take sunlight, breathe in air, and drink water, then they make their own food. By teaching it in simple terms, you quickly identify what you really understand and what you still need to learn. This teaching phase is when the gaps in your knowledge become clear. Maybe you realize that you don't fully understand how light energy is converted into chemical energy, or how plants store that energy. This is an important moment because it shows you exactly where to focus next. Then comes the repeat phase. After teaching, you go back to the source material to fill in the gaps. You dive deeper into the chemical process involved in photosynthesis, learning about the light-dependent and light-independent reactions. You might create a mind map of the process, which helps you visualize the flow and connections between each step. By repeating this cycle, observing, teaching, and revisiting, you're reinforcing what you've learned and making sure it sticks. The Feynman technique is designed to help you not only understand a topic but also retain it for the long term. It's an active, engaging process that ensures you're learning deeply, not just memorizing surface-level facts. After going through this process, you'll find that you not only understand photosynthesis but can explain it to someone else confidently. You've used the Feynman technique to internalize the material in a way that's meaningful and long-lasting. This live example shows how the Feynman technique works in real time. It's not just about passively absorbing information, it's about actively engaging with it, teaching it, and reinforcing your understanding. The more you practice, the faster and more effectively you learn. It's a powerful strategy that turns learning into a dynamic, engaging process. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to stay updated on more learning hacks and strategies.